Hellgate London has baggage. Revisiting old titles can be fun sometimes, or dull, reflecting on what your brain was doing and what you enjoyed or persevered through because you thought it was fun. Hellgate London is a pit I fell into for around 50 hours because of what it has become since it released in 2007. It was very clear why it arrived in my home. Because it said on the back of the box, the creators of Diablo are bringing hell to you. It's why my dad bought it. It's the new Diablo after Blizzard North was gone and my dad wanted something fresh. Turns out, after meeting him again this summer and talking with him, this was the last video game he ever bought for himself. We had to confirm this too. This is not a hit against the game either, just a realization that we both had, because Hellgate London was more for my dad and myself than the rest of my family. We ran through normal mode an unhealthy amount of times, sometimes attempting nightmare difficulty only for it to turn around and kick us out halfway into Act 3 when the progression scaling was too much, and we were not invested into a lot of the extraneous systems and stats. I think my dad played it so much that he hit burnout, that simply ended his game playing habits as his lifestyle changed due to a few job changes, and even being retired now has not relit them. So now, I returned to Hellgate London to see what it was all about, which is easier said than done. It was surprising to find Hellgate London available on Steam for starters, and for quite the decent price. And then it was time to do my research. Between 2007 and now, a lot has happened in the Hellgate space, and I want to keep it brief. Long story short, Hellgate London, originally developed by Flagship Studios, created by ex-Blizzard North members, lasted about a year before losing the intellectual property, eventually landing in the hands of Hanbitsoft, Korean distributors of Hellgate London. The reasons why it only lasted a year are numerous, and if you'd like to know more, check out Nerdslayer's classic Death of a Game video about it to get a sense of the bureaucracy surrounding the title, and the studio's death revolving around over-ambition. Hellgate floated around for the most part with titles like Hellgate Global until 2018, when it arrived on Steam with the promise of it being the version which brings as much of the content Hellgate London had on the table. Now, not everything is available, for instance, any of the multiplayer outright, which is what Hellgate 2038 is all about. So only a majority of the single-player content is available. That said, it kind of makes the original retail version obsolete because of its lack of access to anything beyond its original story content. However, a trip to the community is required in order for Hellgate Steam to run properly at all. I'm not sure what happened, but there is a severe problem with the Steam version, given the name the 1 frame per second bug, which frankly sometimes I wished it would run at 1 frame per second because the name is sometimes a compliment. The bug, seemingly random, but more apparent the further you dive in, hamstrings the game to run at slideshow speed, and cause for this is still, as far as I know, unknown. There's a lot of maybes. Is it because of killing a certain enemy? Maybe. Is it because you looked in a certain direction? Maybe. Is it because of too many particle effects? Maybe. Is it because a certain enemy is alive? Maybe. Is it because enemies sometimes respawn 2 minutes after you've dealt with them in a previous area on the map, leading to a perceived overflow of loading instances? Did the game sneeze weird? It's all possible, and I'll use the word here. It can make the game unplayable. Sometimes I wish it would just crash. The longest instance of this bug lasted over 12 minutes, giving me time to go to the bathroom, do my dailies in a mobile game, wash some dishes, and still come back to bask in the glory of less than 1 frame per second gameplay. Opinions on this are different depending on who you're talking to, but I remember the original version being very kind to PCs back in 2007, and being a rather optimized experience with smooth gameplay, especially when you can be dealing with dozens of enemies at one time in a closed, cramped map. And that is the major issue with the Steam version. But if you want to experience everything the game has to offer, see what fixes are available. There was a video out there describing the Hellgate community as being unusually strong, but the dedication is admirable, and lifts my spirits with the level of perseverance. Now, that may be the major issue, but there are others. mainly the English. Clearly, when releasing the new content and tweaking the game, the team did not really have people who could provide great localization. So when you're starting a new game, you get hit with it immediately. The opening quest serving as your tutorial has changed considerably compared to 2007, so much so they rewrote the opening of the story. In the 2007 version, you begin in an alley and get a call from Murmur, who becomes your traveling buddy throughout the main story. The team he was with was taken out by forces unknown because we do not really see them and there are only a few zombies around, but they were to retrieve a man named Fox. Talking to a dying Templar, Fox is very important as he seems to have something that could turn the tide of Hell's invasion, and you are off to deliver a message. Errand boy stuff to start us off on our journey. The tutorial is casual, even in its writing, to learn the basic menus. The Steam version doesn't do this. Starting off in a different location, but also the same? The tutorial is ham-fisted and clunky, especially in its writing. Welcome to the Hellgate world. That mouse has some junk in the trunk. Now look for James. Talk to James. How to use the skills. Spurt skill. Have you equipped the 2% increase in attack skill that you received as reward? Grinnick HQ. This game is good for Windows 9. And then you get put into a station that has so little meaning, but was probably there for multiplayer, with such lines as this, and reminding you of the daily quest rewards here. And then they extend the Dr. Fox plotline into multiple maps to get the same information to deliver the message about Dr. Fox. And now Murmur has some cool anime hair, which we will see on other people's heads as well. I will say the Steam version does have a surprising amount of text rewritten for it, which seems unnecessary, but at the same time I'm good they did it. Including story events, side quests, names of places. Looking at the maps, I have no idea why names had to be changed. Like, were rights lost to London place names, or to make them more accurate? I originally thought of going through the game twice with both versions just to see what differences there was, and then understood the scope of that endeavor versus my time and support, and asked myself, is it worth it? I'm still gonna do it time to time. But now we're into Act 1 outright, getting to Covent Garden Station to deliver the message to Brandon Lan. And since we are here now, I suppose I should say something about the premise of Hellgate London. Well, turns out in the year of Satan, 2020, demons evaded Earth from Hell. Yeah! And now it is 2038, 18 years into the conflict, with humanity being pushed back into hiding, and the people of London hiding in the magically protected London Underground. We'll talk more about the story as it comes up, such as why hell literally broke loose, and who some of these characters are in the opening cinematic that still holds up really well. But who are we, the character? Unfortunately, we are the Messiah figure, as I have made my disdain for in Diablo's writing, and I am totally looking forward to Diablo 3 because I totally am. Solving everyone's problems single-handedly because everyone else is just not that good. Why were we loitering around in an alleyway alone when we are also told that we are in an area that is losing the fight against the demons and is becoming less and less safe? Because we can do anything we want. We're not bound by the system. We are insert class here, which are rather intriguing at first glance. Guardian, Blade Master, Evoker, Summoner, Marksman, and Engineer. Pairs of classes belonging to their own factions, the Templars, the Kabbalists, and the Hunters. We get a fair amount of all three in the story, as well as the Techsmiths bringing their own thing with their own guilds, rather important throughout the story. It's pretty obvious who I chose when starting, being 15, 16 at the time. Dual swords. Enough said. Dad went with the Guardian, honoring the Paladin. But this time I went with the Evoker to get a feel of the first-person shooter side of the Hellgate gameplay, which felt more appropriate. Playing around with fire-based abilities, which I feel shouldn't work on demons from hell, but I'll take it, mixing with protective abilities which worked very well. I'm sure I would have enjoyed the Summoner or the Engineer as well, having minions to aid you. For normal mode, the gameplay is pretty cozy once you get into your own rhythm, not thinking about things too much, but not taking advantage of the entire hotkey bar, which probably is necessary for the higher difficulties. The choice between third and first person perspectives for most classes is also appreciated, although understandable that the Templars are the only third person. Understanding distances and range for your abilities to think about your placement against enemies brings you in enough to engage with the different map designs of Hellgate. I'll talk more about the maps later, but for now, I'll say they have a good feel to them. Wandering the streets, train connections, and park areas have a weight to them. Torn asunder, unused, tainted with lava pimples in some areas, with slight dips in elevation, with collapsed buildings and rubble. It's good. However, there are sewers, I must mention, which can stink up the place but serve as a tool for storytelling. People retreating and trying to find safety underground, of course ending up in the sewers with litter and remnants everywhere. Also, they sometimes serve as transition areas for the purpose of arguing less demon presence than going topside. I can understand that. Of course, this can't be a Diablo-like game without loot, making this a first/third-person looter shooter / hack and slash. I had to put it this way because I could not say it the other way. Kill the demons, get the loot they clearly were not carrying, and change your pants. Imagine if a looter-style game was able to create loot tables per enemy that make logical sense for them to drop. How much time that would take. Anyway, my feelings about the loot. It's crap. This isn't Diablo 3 Loot 2.0 where loot is more catered to your character class. This is what quest rewards are for, which honestly were really good. I was quite surprised. You are getting random loot that is incompatible with your class a lot of the time, so you go back and do some selling. No, you shouldn't. Maybe in 2007 because money was more scarce. I was never short for money for splurging on premium items, especially for upgrading in the Steam version. Instead, loot is for dismantling and crafting. Yeah, let's add crafting to the list because if you want to upgrade items you can use, you need crafting materials only available from dismantled loot. This includes enchanted and fancy loot too, not just normal stuff. So now you think of how much time you have to spend stopping with your inventory every time it gets full and dismantling everything one by one. For the first 30 minutes of playing, I remembered learning to have to do this so long ago that it almost killed my drive to continue playing, looking at the inventory longer than actually playing the game. Now, I don't remember if this appears in the 2007 version, but the Steam version comes with good quality of life improvements, including my saving grace, auto dismantlers. Never leave home without them. Set them to whatever quality of loot you don't want to bother with, and they become instant crafting materials instead. In a way, it takes a lot of the magic out of loot, out of the looter genre. But I need streamlining in my life, and loot does not give my brain what it's supposed to give me chemically, so I'll take it. And I'll take it all the way to Covent Garden Station to deliver that message. The message has to do with the ability to detect when hell rifts, baby versions of the Hellgate, open, and it is possible that Fox is alive based on a message received before we arrived at the station. But you might notice the amount of yellow exclamation points from other NPCs. Side quests are abundant in Hellgate London, and apart from some notable quest chains, most involve killing X amount of a specific enemy, collecting drops from enemies, interacting with objects in different maps, or slaying a unique enemy. What gets me about these side quests is that they usually involve something inconvenient happening that you have to fix because no one else will do it or die trying, but the game does attempt to have these quests not off the main trail too much. Rarely will the game ask of you to return to a map from over an hour ago where the enemies are now underleveled for you. Hellgate London tries to make completing side quests an incentive because they increase your standing with each station you pass through. Standing really does not do much besides unlocking more things for you to do, but silently, especially when your standing with a station cannot be increased any further, side quest rewards also include an additional attribute point for your character. They trickle in one at a time, but with how many side quests there are versus how quickly each standing meter can be filled, it can be seen as a good investment. That, and I like not seeing quest markers all over the place. An unfortunate curse I must bear. Unfortunately, Hellgate London sometimes can make these side quests difficult to complete because of its programming. I noticed that with both killing X amount of enemies and interacting with objects, that sometimes the game would not spawn enough of either of them to complete it, especially if I happened to be starting the side quests after I had already been to the location before. Exiting the game and restarting fixed the issue, but what it did show to me was how annoying it can be traversing maps when you have nothing else to do, and how slow you can feel. There are adrenaline pills occasionally provided to you that increase your movement speed, and that made me want the normal speed to just be that. So you enter the Hell Rift and unfortunately find Fox's body, but we retrieve a device that has the ability to close the Hell Rifts, and learn of a Hell Rift opening in the British Museum. We also get name dropped with Prince Gulkar, who occupies the museum after the Templars lost it in battle years ago, and that of the game's central villain, an elder demon named Sidonai, who opened the Hellgate 18 years ago. Sometimes Hellgate London will expand its world and history, but rarely, such as the battle for the British Museum being lost when the Templar forces were split up to also protect the Maritime Museum. As Hell's forces continued to grow, especially with each dead human, defeat was inevitable. It meant that in order to achieve any sort of victory with dwindling numbers, humanity has had to adapt to more focused, piercing attacks, such as assassination attempts of prominent demons, in the hopes of cutting through the droves of minions. It makes sense, and I'm glad for little moments like this. It cuts through my annoyance of being a one-man army a little bit when you kind of have to be one and go straight for the throat of the targeted enemy in the narrative. But also make sure that you take down everything that moves for the experience. Don't want to miss out on levels and sweet loot instantly dismantled. The British Museum is surprisingly a unique map that does not come up again in the game. It's rare to see that kind of restraint. You find the rift, successfully close and deal with Gulkar afterwards, waiting with his fiend masters, and also buddies since I timed my kills in an inconvenient way to make this fight harder. Upon his defeat though, a different portal appears, leading to a quiet, cut-off place from the rest of the world, where someone called the Mother is waiting, bearer of life and a virtue of man. They were known as truths in the original game, and she was called the Sage. The Steam version's text really does away with a lot of the mysticism and cryptic language that is used to invoke imagery of hope, despair, and the damage that hell has done to places we will never see or know. In some cases, it helps ground the narrative. This area still speaks to me because it presents such an unsettling atmosphere. Just empty. A pocket of space with a single mysterious individual. The Mother shows us a representation of what the world could be again, clean and full of light, tasking us to seek the bravery in man. And this leads to the end of Act 1, reporting our findings and making sense of this encounter. We can learn more about this virtue by speaking to Arfon and Charing Cross, so off we go. Entering Act 2, we meet Arfon, who welcomes us to the team known as Redemption, who does not really exist in the original text. It is also where the matter-of-factness of this version of the story takes over. In the original version, we are left with cryptic clues about where to go. In the Steam version, we just know to find the next virtue, the Father, and that there is a book inside of a Hell Rift that will help us do that. In one way, I miss the mystery and that form of creative writing that drives us forward and compels us to keep going. On the other hand, this text cuts through the floatiness of the dialogue and makes the story easier to digest. So I guess I'm saying I don't know what I want. The very definition of a gamer. Now, you might be wondering at this time now how the Hellgate was able to be opened in the first place. It turns out, Hell was able to swarm and begin consuming Earth due to the literal spiritual death of the human race. And we are seeking and collecting the different parts that make up the faith in humanity. The Mother/Sage, the first virtue, pertains to life or knowledge, and it's mentioned how people in the station have begun feeling more optimistic since your encounter with the Mother. For Act 2, I remember a little more than the other acts because it focuses on two specific characters. Lucius Alden and TechSmith 314, or Pi, as I like to call him. However, Act 2 has gone through a lot of rewriting, and arguably I'd say for the better. In 2007, Lucius Alden is a mentally insane abuser to TechSmith 314, going on unhinged tirades to the detriment of him, and TechSmith 314 is a miserable victim of his abuse, choosing to take it, and ultimately has his life stolen from him due to how the act plays out. These characters have been rewritten to be far better. Alden is now a shamed individual due to him being responsible for the destruction and loss of Green Park Station because of his attempt to control the Well of Midnight, a source of demonic and magical power the Kabbalists try to use, but mostly fail to contain as demons spawn in droves and many lives are usually lost in the process. TechSmith 314 is a reclusive member of the Baker family, closely tied to understanding the ideals of man and fighting back against the shadows of hell. 314 forsook his spiritual family lineage to the sciences of the TechSmith Guild, finding peace and solitude from his powerful family name. Throughout the act, your job is to retrieve and reconstruct a book hidden away with information about the virtues, and Alden and Pi must overcome their failures and pasts to find the courage to move forward in order to help humanity, courage being the second virtue. Compare this to the original, where instead of a book, you retrieve parts of a separated, powerful demon named the Oracle, who might be able to lead us to the next virtue, stitching the demon back together and making 314 its host for the rest of his existence, as well as other torturous things. Yeah, I'm glad it's rewritten. The act culminates in a rather interesting twist. Through the Oracle's powers or through Hell's minions directly and Alden's abilities, a portal is created directly linking to 314's mind, which we must traverse to find the virtue, defeating 314's psyche in the process. At first I thought this to be a unique map until I saw they use it again in the very next act to show the inside of one of Hell's spaceships. With this, Act 2 finishes with Raymond, 314's true name, leading us to the next virtue, unity, held by the sister. Raymond continues to stay around in the story, acting as a compass to help find the other virtues as well, and it's off to Southwark Station, or Temple Station as it used to be called. Now, I haven't mentioned this yet, but despite everything, Hellgate London can be a roller coaster, with peaks of interest which dive fast into tiring experiences. By Act 3, I was starting to feel tired of the gameplay loop, especially when, to get from point A to point B, you are usually traversing 3 full maps, and they have lost their luster by this point. The broken streets are not cool anymore, and it sucks that they put so much detail into the nooks and crannies you can go into, because it's never worth it. My time is being wasted by superfluous things that do not add anything substantial, and the 1 frame per second bug is only getting worse from here as we properly enter the Plague arc. What's interesting about the rewrites is that they made the side quests so much more cohesive than in the 2007 version. Because if you have been doing the side quests, you have been dealing with the beginnings of the Plague arc before Act 3 started, all thanks to Gil, and this blends into the main story quests. Heck, the Plague keeps going all the way in side quests until Act 5. Because plagues are just that resilient, a good reminder. Another side quest chain across multiple characters is receiving a bunch of information about demonology from someone named M, which then mixes to include subterfuge and misinformation regarding the plague. Gee, wonder who M could be. Anyway, a plague has caused a rift in trust between the Hunters, led by Rourke, and Sir Singh, the first seer of the Kabbalists. Since we kind of know that a Kabbalist, as well as ourselves, inadvertently caused the plague? Oops. So we need to do something about it. This involves getting samples and finding what seems to be the source of the plague by having Rourke and Sir Singh settle their differences, finding out that the source is an exospectre, one of the spaceships I mentioned earlier. Shooting it down with a turret, you enter it, looking the same as 314's mind, and find the Crown of Unity, but do not meet anyone. Turns out, we've been bamboozled, and the virtue has been taken by a demon known as Arachnus. Demons might not be able to use the virtues, but can keep them away, which I find to be a silly way to extend this act. You already come across dialogue that really shows character development from so many people in Southwark Station for how important unity is to being able to stand against everyone's common evil. They understand once more they're all in this together, and spiritually they have been rejuvenated. There shouldn't be a physical object tied to this because there certainly wasn't for the previous two. In the 2007 version, the third truth just accidentally shows up after you cleanse a map of the plague using a story-based gun, the Cleanser, and face a very specific boss. In fact, another thing was replaced in Act 2 as well, an embankment readout. You used to command a squad of 4 soldiers in a clunky feeling change of gameplay, but that was changed to a regular map. Now, you enter a series of new maps traveling over the Tower Bridge, which is pretty cool, to descend the other side to fight Arachnus in what looks like his domain. It's not bad at all. There is a separate station and everything. Templar base used to be connected directly, which felt odd. This is good. We meet the sister, properly awaken the virtue of unity, and make our way to Act 4 and Monument Station. Throughout playing Act 3, something repressed resurfaced, which was the reason why I stopped playing Hellgate many years ago. It was triggered by properly facing these enemies again. They go by many names, like Pain Leech, which is fitting because they bring out irrational anger in me. It seems by design they are made to infuriate me. They are invisible enemies to all attacks, not even loaded into any maps until either they prefer to be right in your face or spawn right behind you, ready to throw out the most pathetic spectral attack floating towards you. They're not even difficult to defeat. They're just one of those enemies that is created out of being the most gigantic I have ever encountered. Especially in tight corridors, they stop you in your tracks just enough to start creating rashes on your skin. I remembered a memory of my anger being so nearly unmanageable that it was my first time realizing that I was not having fun with this game I devoted so much time to. And that was when I stopped. Sorry there was no defining rage quit moment, but it was the introspection to just say, no, stop, and put it away until I started playing it through all again for this video. This game has so many kinds of roller coasters in it, it's nearly astounding. Act 4 is where things start getting heated as we begin to butt heads with the prominent characters only mentioned in passing so far. Does this mean we get to return to the opening cinematic? Sure, let's do it. It could be dangled longer, but man, that cinematic was so cool, wasn't it? Act 4 deals with the internal tensions of the leadership of the Templar between 2 members of the Summerisle family. Maxim, the current Seneschal and acting Grand Master, and Jessica, rightful heir, granddaughter of Patrick, who led an assault on the Hellgate early in Hell's invasion and perished. Maxim, Jessica's uncle, is not popular with those who believe that Jessica, now of age, should take over as leader, since that was Maxim's role when Patrick died. Maxim was always in the shadow of Patrick's deeds and leadership, leading him to blindly seek glory in any way he can, including sending minimal troops to battlefields with the trust and belief that they can do the job, when they clearly cannot. There's only one person capable of that, and that's me. Maxim just thinks that everybody has godlike player character powers, which is funny in how absurd that sounds. It's like it's self-aware. So you have 2 perspectives for Maxim. The people who follow his orders even though they have common sense and know that they march to their deaths, and the people who know better and say he's an idiot. Act 4 is shaky at best because it really screams for Jessica to show up and present some dramatic tension, having the 2 leaders bump heads, But unfortunately, they shove her away in Act 5 with barely a voice to the continuing story. It's frustrating, especially when there is opportunity for this game to really bring characters to life, but there is no vision behind the writing. Between 2007 and the Steam versions, the writing is either too flat and
boring,
or too tonally adrift for any proper investment in characters. There is definitely no vision behind the voice acting, which also changed between the versions?
You're among friends. Open up, see what happens. We might surprise you.
You've been injected with words from my mouth. These will be the most difficult tasks you've ever faced.
Don't mention it. Really, don't.
I'm programmed to say something kind and uplifting at this point, but there is apparently an error that is working in my favor.
Oh, fan-tastic. Another f***ing mutant. I suppose you want to buy some bull organs or some other yeah? Sake. A little sunshine and fresh air might clean up all your f***ing self-imposed ritual scarification shit. I'll be seriously f***ing anticipating your next visit to my bullshit. Thank you! Nah, you don't want to purchase my shit guns. Trust me. They fire sideways. They're built by zombie retards in some f***ing outreach program. Come again soon if you're not killed by the faulty shit I sold you.
Stand tall. Get me a sandwich.
It's ridiculous with no focus. Diablo 2 had believable voice acting to bring you into the world, and even though Hellgate tries to sell itself more like an MMO than a single-player experience a lot of the time, you could still have something here. There are bits that have life to them. For instance, another side quest chain started in Act 3 involved John's, not done in 2007, changing his character to be someone who was saved from the plague by having organs, blood, and other parts of his body replaced with demon parts, making him a rather unique character you personally have a relationship with. He resents you and your participation in saving his life, but learns to accept himself and the value he has gained by becoming someone who can detect and monitor demon activity. It's neat. So Maxim, in his blind hunger for glory, decides that now is the best time to assault the Hellgate, making you errand boy again to deliver messages. Most soldiers know it is suicide, but many go anyways. This leads to a set-piece fight with the Beast of Abaddon at the Tower of London, and then evacuating people, but with problems involving the portal systems, which ultimately leads to you using the old trains. Act 4 is a weird spot for the game to communicate how blueprints and crafting works, this being the only required time, and also unnecessarily introducing a bad idea: encumbrance. See, you have to fix the train and find 3 parts, but can only find and carry one of them at a time because they are heavy, and as you go further into the map, the longer it takes to get back to the train and the more the enemies pile on at your slower pace. It is strange putting in this mechanic because very few people enjoy being over-encumbered in a video game. These acts of sacrifice and bringing people together to get to safety and saving people brings together the next virtue: brotherhood or fellowship. So, what about Maxim? He's just dead. He walked up to the Hellgate and died. Maxim mystifies me as a character because he ousted himself, saving the story the trouble of actually doing something with him. He was a crux in the Templar leadership because he was a gigantic, and what does the story do? Simply eject him, and the issues kind of went with him. This, I don't know how to put it, genocidal martyr? The story did not know what to do with him, except burn him. And yeah, he's actually dead. He doesn't come back. Some side quests in Act 5 ask you to confirm if he's still around, and he just isn't. This is amazing. How do you get rid of a power struggle involving a just allow him to do what he wants? Everybody's hands are clean. Brotherhood. Act 5. We go to see Jessica. There are so many excuses due to the amount of demons around the station she's at, but we know that is irrelevant to us. We also get introduced to Emira, someone so important she gets to be in upcoming cinematics. Sadly, she is too underdeveloped for me to say much about her. She's a powerful magic user who in the rewrites has history with Murmur. Hey, remember Murmur? Our traveling companion? There's a reason why I haven't brought him up, and that's about it. On the way to meet Jessica in Mark Lane Station is another person whom some players of Hellgate might remember negatively. A man simply named Broker. What's his deal? We don't know. He's pretty underdeveloped as well, although they try to connect him to Sir Sing in the rewrites. The reason why people dislike him though is that he is swimming in side quests, which are scattered around places you've already been to hours before, with no easy way to get back to him unless you know to put down a relocation device and only use recall portals to avoid backtracking through roughly 1.5 maps to get to him. He might be in a station, but it's filled with enemies and has no waypoint entry, so he's a real inconvenience. Remember him for later though? We do arrive finally in Liverpool Station to finally see Lyra Darius here. She was the woman in the opening cinematic protecting Lyra making a sacrifice. How did she... I'm gonna let the original text speak for me here. However, she does have a quest line where she is desperately trying to figure out how she survived. And then figuring out what happened to the demon she fought and defeating it. Closure? And here she is. Jessica Summerisle, looking fit and ready as we are tasked with interacting with something known as the Marker, found within a place known as the Necropolis. Not to be confused with the enemy Necropolis that can also be found within the Necropolis. The Marker is apparently tied to the final virtue, encompassing the sigil, the means to fight back against Hell properly this time. Yes, there are preparations to assault the Hellgate again so soon after the last one, but this one is different. Maxim only sent Templars last time, when we have Templars, Kabbalists, Hunters, and anyone else who's willing to die for us. Jessica even comes with us to the Necropolis in order to prove herself of her leadership inherited by her grandfather and a idiot. There are times throughout Hellgate you will see other NPCs in maps moving around and fighting. I was actually looking forward to witnessing the grand battlefields we enter from time to time to contribute to the team. And by that I mean defeating everything single-handedly because no one is capable of defeating anything other than yourself. They will try, pathetically so, but when even my thorns damage can take down a zombie, it leaves me depleted. Sure, NPCs can't kill enemies because then you can't get the experience, but I really shouldn't care about that when it deflates everything around me. I'll say it. In video games, I'm sick of being put in situations where I'm the only one who can do anything about anything because nothing else is given a single sense of agency or power. It makes what I'm fighting for lose its meaning when the world fails to demonstrate its ability to protect itself after I, the character, leave. So many video game worlds need CPR and mouth-to-mouth resuscitation stat. So while Jessica is waddling around in your general vicinity, you traverse the first of 2 dungeons to feature multiple levels. 5, to be exact. And you might be thinking, there's 2? Yes, 1 is not in the main game, technically. It's coming. The Necropolis map is a solid map from my perspective, feeling like a Diablo 2 map that has been converted into 3D, showcasing a tighter environment with some offshoot corridors with multiple elevations. You reach the bottom, find the marker, and this is the last that you'll see of Jessica Summerisle in the story. She gets self-confidence to become a leader. Into the bin with her. She does not really contribute to the remainder of the story because it's time for tests of worth. These felt weird to do as the game incorporates capture the flag, capture and hold zones, turning all nodes of a line from red to blue and keeping it that way. I really hate that they're called beauty knots. And capture the flag and gain points by how many flags you hold. These connect to the 4 virtues we've unlocked so far, but the 5th is different. This is a change I like compared to 2007, as it expands more on a specific character. Replacing a throwaway side quest, 314 finds a place to speak privately and talk to you about a traitor in Redemption, who orchestrated a lot of events for his own benefits, including being the character referred to as M with all of the demonology records. Arfon even mentions a member of Redemption who was removed for abusing the network of information that was passed around. The rewrites make Murmur make more sense in the narrative because in 2007, he always kept his secrets secret up to the final test where he inexplicably shows up. And this tells you something is going to happen. Emmer is here as well, along with Alden in 314. But the change from Murmur being a complete unknown with a lot of cryptic information he shouldn't have to Redemption Exile works a little better. It does not really help that the final test really isn't a test per se. You could dress it up like a gauntlet of sorts, but it's just slaying more enemies. In 2007, there was a giant robot you could control, but it was very clunky and pointless overall, so I'm glad they removed it. Emra even has some choice words for Murmur. Get lost. We find the final sigil point, and in 2007, Murmur murmured some incoherent things about it being too late, and then the big man himself, Sinai, shows up to simply cleave him and leave as quickly as he arrived. But the rewrite wants you to know of Murmur's treachery. In a quest header, Murmur wanted the virtues for himself, trying to take them from under us and manipulating others like Gil and Maxim, but could not use the virtues himself, because Murmur is not human. He is from hell, planning to invade himself before Sinai stole the idea from him and acted first. He tries to take the final virtue right in front of us and rips apart and regains his original hair. We meet with the final virtue, the child, of rebirth, or originally, hope. The original text is better about this because it states that the last truth is really the first, the one never lost, which is kind of true. This conflict would not have lasted 18 years without some hope that it could be different. We become the sigil, the bearer of all, that we can carve a path forward. Onward to the Hellgate. In some maps at this point, you are actually able to see the Hellgate in the distance, which is quite nice. But why couldn't you see it earlier if it's so huge? At this point, you can look back at the entire map and see how much you have traveled, and it really feels like a journey full of things. And then I realized something. Since the game uses the London Underground as a backdrop for its locations in London, I wondered, how accurate is this map to distances between the real London Underground tube stations? Shockingly, it is pretty accurate, which makes me ask, why were we not able to see the Hellgate from Russell Square at the beginning of the game when St. Paul's, the end of the game, is so ridiculously close to it? Really, when you do this comparison, the journey that we go through is actually a little sad when compared to reality. The distance between Charing Cross and Monument Station is roughly 3 kilometers or 1.8 miles, or a 35 to 40 minute walk. From Russell Square to St. Paul's, it's a 30-minute walk. You can say that because of the destruction of the city or some excuse, it would be difficult to traverse, but damn, I'm at a loss. This isn't the Darien Gap between Panama and Colombia. and there definitely has not been enough established involving other effects of Hell's invasion to also prevent this tiny bit of travel, apart from a massive pit.
It was at this moment that he knew. He f***ed up.
Maybe that's all it needs. Either we are being gaslit that the demon invasion is really bad, or we have been doing fine for how close we have remained to the Hellgate. We should have started all the way in Watford for all I really care, or for a really cool road trip scenario, start off in like Gloucester, or do a reverse D-Day and start in Dunkirk across the Strait of Dover. Now I'm just getting ideas. Anyway, the finale. We get cinematics again, with Emera leading the charge against the Hellgate. We must have a different Hellgate than her, because we can just waltz into the cathedral and finally take our first steps into Hell. Enemy lines. You know, for all the fighting we've been doing against Hell, there hasn't been any mention of communication. Sinai is the central villain, the leader of all of this, and we don't have any form of antagonistic action from him other than throwing demons at us. Even his more important demons with names stand for nothing but obstacles in our way, which makes it strange when we enter the vast wasteland, and we are tasked with dealing with the antithesis of the virtues/truths, the lies. So Hell has its own system, which I have to presume is what they used in order to invade in the first place, collecting the overwhelming power of despair, rash, flaw, discord, and bedlam, which led to the spiritual death of humanity and broke through. Defeating the embodiment of each, we reach Sinai. Emera shows her worth before we deal with him personally. I think what she does here is give her power to us, but it's really vague. And we go and defeat an elder demon of Hell. And our ending. Murmur appears. They make him incredibly striking in this cinematic, mixed with his nonchalant attitude, and realize that it was not a victory for us. What happens when you strike down a powerful leader? A power vacuum forms, and something needs to replace it. And Murmur finally had his opportunity to strike, mentions he has his own friends to command, and with that he does the last courteous thing he will do. Thank us, and remove us from the equation. The cinematic has imprinted on me because it is presented so strongly. And for 2007, that was the end of Hellgate London. Really, you are chucked into a portal, and that's it. This was the last game I played where I thought, maybe, just maybe, if you played the game again, New Game Plus, that the story would be a little bit different. That instead of Sinai, it would be Murmur in his place at the very end. Unfortunately, that was not to be. For a lot of people, the story ends here. But presumably as early as 2011 in Hellgate Global, a relaunched version with its first piece of additional content in 2012, the story would continue with Second Attack or Second Invasion, depending on the source. Remember Broker? Well, he managed to snatch you away after Murmur tossed you through his portal, and it is now 40 days after your battle with Sinai, and there is no good news. There was no victory. Murmur took over, and with his legion, wiped out everything. To be honest, not like we did much to begin with. Success lived and died with us. What did I say about when we, the character, leave and that the world around us has nothing to defend itself? Anyway, we have to correct this. We must stop Murmur's forces before they begin, which involves a slight bit of time travel. Delivering a message to Broker from the past in Mark Lane Station, he opens a portal to Closed Station, a protected area where we meet someone familiar but unfamiliar, Dr. Fox. Second Attack acts as an Act 0 to Hellgate London, where Fox is figuring out how to destroy Hell Rifts, and we become a helper in the creation of the devices we use in the main game. While we do this, we are also breaking into the domains of the 5 demon lords that Sinai and then Murmur control via contract for their legions, and kill them. Broker is able to help us as an aid to dive straight into each domain, giving us a list of targets to take out before we are able to reach each lord. This expansion is rather straightforward in its design, but also weirdly reminds me of Persona 3 The Answer in its design and framework, having a central hub with doors that unlock one after the other, and you descending each until you reach the end, and then you repeat. I will say the repetition gets stale after a while, and really points out something I didn't realize before. Back when I was mentioning the different types of side quests, I glanced past the ones like where you slay a unique enemy. Second Attack is all about slaying unique enemies, and it occurred to me that in the text, and even in the names of the enemies themselves, I have no idea what kind of enemies I was looking for. They never really describe what type of enemy they are, what they look like. Not even the vaguest hint is attempted. It shows lack of caring about the demons themselves when they can be so interchangeable that no effort needs to be put in. It's not even encouraged in the basic gameplay to bum rush a map to get to a certain point, because if you do that, every enemy you pass by will be right behind you to tear you limb from limb. I'm surprised I'm saying this now, after the main story is over, but playing Hellgate London is a slow and calculated experience, clearing a path for yourself, leaving no enemy alive. It's not like they stay dead either, since enemies respawn after a random amount of time has passed, as I mentioned very early in this video, which can make that 1 frame per second bug flare up. While you are clearing through each route and slaying each lord, you retrieve an artifact from each one, which you bring back to Fox. He also mentions that he has met someone else who has been helping him with his research and is interested in the artifacts, said to be able to open a path to the Abyss, which is different from Hell. It is also getting close to the time where Fox is supposed to be escorted, which we know leads to his death. But maybe with us, Fox may live. I will say that Second Attack, the new maps are quite refreshing, especially the Citadel maps with their vertical structure, and forests? Yes, please. The final fight against Astaroth even has a mechanic where you must take down his goons before you can fight him directly, and has his own arena. Upon returning with the final artifact, unfortunately, a techsmith, 666, took Fox's device for him, and we are tasked to rescue him. Deja vu, we find the techsmith dead, but the devices are missing. While this is happening, Fox was getting jumped for Astaroth's artifact, and we definitely know that it was Murmur who was responsible, especially since we know what he's capable of. Except now, Murmur has access to the Abyss. What can he do there? Find out more as we pursue Murmur in the next expansion, The Abyss Chronicles, or the Chronicles of the Abyss, or simply The Abyss. Is there anything official? I can't find anything to say otherwise. Oh, sorry, I forgot an expansion. Stonehenge. Luckily, they're both accessed through the Templar base, so I can fit it in here before it becomes irrelevant. Stonehenge is short and sweet, and blue skies? What is this? Yay, refreshing. Oh, so much refreshment. There's also a large amount of vendors, which makes me think that when this was available to paid subscribers only, there might have been lineups to use the vendors at one point. Stonehenge revolves around the messengers of hell you encounter through the main story, and the essences they drop depending on the type of enemy. Using the essences, you complete different paths, defeating bosses to fight the big bad boss at the end, Moloch. It's a tight gameplay loop that might have been fun at one time with 3 of your friends, since they mentioned this when you tackle the wilds. But Stonehenge becomes irrelevant once you reach the Abyss and beyond. We enter Parliament Square, which is pretty cool to wander around for a bit, where we talk to Titus and Yeah, everything's fine with this. We find out that Murmur was around encouraging others to start excavating Parliament to some unknown means. But we can see that it has unveiled something, including a very important book which we need to find. It wasn't going to be given to Murmur. Also, the English is starting to deteriorate because this is long past anything related to flagships, so text is rather ham-fisted. I will say how refreshing this indoor map is to the game's feel. So much has been wide open spaces that having a more tightly closed building to traverse in with multiple floors, although repurposed, like some of those basement areas are found down a single flight of stairs on the 3rd floor. Regardless, it's very welcome. It allows the ambient sounds to shine, as sometimes you might hear the rustling of something nearby. At least in my playthrough, enemies were quite scarce in the beginning of exploring these areas, which caught me off guard. Come to think of it, I haven't talked much about the music at all. And that's because I don't have much to say, except that the ambient sounds are really good, and the actual music is not implemented into the game very well. To me, there are no hooks to any of the tracks. And also the music has trouble starting and stopping at times when it should be appropriate. Like, you could be engaging in a swarm of enemies or a boss-like monster, and there is nothing playing in the background. Or music will start at inappropriate times, or when heading back to a station, it stops in the same way that something will stop after it's chucked down a flight of stairs. It feels like they were trying to incorporate the music in a dynamic way to grow in intensity depending on the fight, but it just doesn't work. Anyway, because we took down the 5 demon lords Murmur was going to use for his legion, obviously he has a backup plan. Become master of the first demon kings found in the Abyss. In order to awaken them, we simply need to run around the areas of Parliament Square and kill enough enemies to spill enough blood, aka fill up a bar, to unlock their domain, which is what Murmur needs to do, so we're kind of helping him at the same time. While we're doing this, Titus, quite the literary type, will be translating the Abyss Chronicles, that hidden book, to learn more. This expansion kind of serves as the introduction of Hellgate turning into a game where you can do your daily grinding. Apart from the rest of the main story at this point being the same quest 4 times, kill dudes to kill a big dude, it is home to quests you are able to repeat every day if you want, and the second and final multi-level dungeon, this one being 15 levels deep, with checkpoints every 5 levels, which is rather generous and is also where big guy Oculus is hanging around, since they reworked the end of Act 3. Unfortunately, I have no business grinding in a game that is perpetually stuck in the year that it was released, so we're moving on. The Abyss is a unique landscape with a skybox that, to be generous to it, feels rather ethereal and has a watercolor effect happening with it. Too bad it also looks like you're swimming in a mix of water and fog as you go through the same map to take out different bosses. As you go, Titus reveals more about the history of the Abyss, such as those who created the Abyss were tethered to it. However, the creation of the full Abyss remains incomplete due to the betrayal of one of the Demon Kings, Sidney, who escaped and locked the rest inside. However, the Abyss Chronicles itself was written by a human being. Ages ago, this being fell into the abyss, and unlike others, was not able to die as he wandered through the torturous landscape. Eventually, he started hearing a story about the ancient demon kings. The voice telling him this continued to murmur to him as he became fascinated with the tale. The voice told him the way out, but with a condition. To guide him properly, the voice would need his body. One of the demon kings was trying to break free. Because the abyss is an eternal place and unable to truly refuse and die, he accepted the demon's offer. The demon being the one we know as Murmur. This is how he was able to escape and how he had a human body. Now, Murmur is on the hunt for his original body, which leads us to the final confrontation. His real name is also Burial, or I like to connect to Belial, the Lord of Lies, because it kind of fits him. The dialogue is clunky and kills the atmosphere, but Murmur just says he's using a body and not his real one that the Kabbalists thought was his real one to lure him out in an ambush, which of course doesn't work. And now we get to finally Murmur's Can you stop? Murmur's fight was really difficult when he keeps laying floor effects which erase shields and evaporates health. And you also have to deal with his two goons, Morbius and Macarena Bro, over here in order to get rid of his invincibility. When he falls, that is the official end to the London arc of Hellgate London. It's time for New Horizons. Every so often, I would think about Hellgate and the possibilities it could have had as a series. That London part of the title could be changed with anywhere else in the world. In over 10 years after its initial release, players finally received that change with the arrival of the Tokyo expansion. Or at least the first act. Possibly the only act too. What I find awkward is that in the main story, in Act 2, you get a preview to the Tokyo expansion, and then nowhere else. Changes are happening in Parliament Square due to Abyssy Wissy stuff, and the arrival of a new enemy through the abyss, the Oni. We talked to Titus about... Okay. We take out some Oni and find out about a gate very similar to a Hellgate, but not quite, because the game says it's a rift of dimension, which we go and investigate. The difference between what Hell is and what the Abyss is never really explained, and at this point in the storytelling, your standards just need to be lowered. We enter into not Hell, because this Hell is purple, and intercept a call from the Tokyo Templars, or the one guy who is left. Arrgh, I hope for a revenge someday. We speak to him, kind of, and learn that his group, led by General Giichin, has uncovered a mysterious artifact that will change the fate of mankind. We follow him through Chuodori Street in Ginza and arrive at the open-air Tokyo base, which does not seem like a good idea with the amount of flying demons around. You do get a nice shot of the destruction around you, though. You speak to Sage, or possibly Sage, I'm really not sure sometimes with these names, and get yourself acquainted with what the Tokyo expansion is about. You are on the hunt for Boxu, a strange Boxu that no one knows exactly where it is except for a guy who is very likely dead or will be soon. This is not sponsored by Boxu, but the entire act revolves around this thing that you don't know what it is, and the dialogue progressively gets more broken along with the performance bug. I can't say much more about the maps either. The effort that was put into them is to be commended, especially the maps around the temples, but they lose their luster, especially when after playing so long and this deep into Hellgate. Throughout this entire journey, I have had multiple lows in terms of energy, pushing through for the sake of progression. You do fight a demon named Katamari though. You get a quest to defeat some enemies named Doll Masters who keep making purlins and keep casting spells to make purlins. Purlin.com for agents. Be above the rest with the touch of a button. Win clients with the right content in the right places at the right time. Contact me. No, I did not click the link. I was also losing my mind thinking of how the characters in this expansion would say the name Sherry Bobbins. All of the voices seem to be in Japanese, although there might be some Korean slipped in there somewhere, I just can't tell.
교대 시간인가요? 힘을 내십시오.
또 누가 내게 선물을 보냈나 보군?
They seem to also try to create quests where you need to speak to specific people, or else there is potential quest failure. But ultimately the game is too rigid for that, so that fizzles. The main thing of note out of all of the expansion is the boss fights against the Great Demons. Each are given their arena through a Hell Rift, and apart from their look, they exist. I was really worried about Kurodon, since I found he had a sharp increase in defense compared to everything else I had faced so far. Out of all of my time playing, he was my literal wall I had to knock down. And he had minions who could heal him too. Which leads us to our final confrontation of the expansion. Actually getting there. The trek through the Edo Castle maps would be fine if it weren't for performance tanking so severely and so often. The 12-minute long bugs were here, and generally had to do with fighting the moth enemies. When they die, they try to take the game with it. So brute forcing the final couple maps, which have these aggressively annoying fiend priests who could summon additional Oni demons to fight you, who are fake and can only be taken down when the priest is killed, but sometimes there are 3 of these guys in one area and they can summon 5 and 6 Oni at a time, so you get overwhelmed very quickly. We finally reach the Hell Rift, where Kaibutsnatan resides. And it's quite a sight to behold. They saved their best for last, this giant enemy, once you awaken them. Unfortunately, there is so much happening in this fight, from floor attacks to minions to moths, that getting smooth footage of this fight is near impossible since so many things can set your FPS to 1 and below. It is beatable though. Very beatable, as the game tells you, okay, you're done, here's your exit. And so, we have found the box. What's in the box? A fragment of a slate, promising possibly 3 more slates down the line from 3 different people, and the following message. Found it. How can I stole it from him? I should go and discuss it with Bach, Amano, and you. They might say that I'm insane, but I will still put that in my hands by even risking my head as bait. Extracted Giichi's record on my way back. This marks the end of Act 1 of the Tokyo expansion. As far as I'm concerned, the end of Hellgate was years ago. While playing through Tokyo and even the Abyss expansion, I felt like I was interacting with a well-dressed corpse. Not really alive in any way, but simply existing. The Abyss expansion gives the only real closure with taking down Murmur, but at what cost? Around $15 Canadian. This became so much more than I was expecting, which was just supposed to be playing through a story I thought I remembered, but with the additions, rewrites, and reworkings, the game wears the skin of something I used to know 15 years ago. And that's not even the end of the Hellgate content. There's also Hellgate VR to check out. My review based on other people experiencing it for me?
It's not a normal demon. No, if we run away, we're finished.
Jessica, there's abnormally high energy around you. Be careful.
One word comes to mind. wretched. I shouldn't imagine Hellgate continuing on with any sort of integrity from its handlers. Like, can you imagine the Tokyo expansion getting 3 to 4 more parts? I really hate saying the word act, by the way, because with my voice on any microphone, it just sounds terrible to me. What would it be worth? Hellgate was an incredibly ambitious title that everyone who worked on moved on from, some scaling back design to create the wonderful Torchlight. But eventually, this all comes to a head in this retrospective as I now turn my sights on Diablo 3, which will be the final video. If you have watched the previous 2 parts, or just watched this one because it talks about Hellgate, thank you very much for watching. If for some reason you are interested in experiencing Hellgate for yourself with the bells, whistles, ticks, and mosquitoes, it is priced very generously on Steam for the 40 to 50 hour experience you get from it. Thank you again for watching. See you next time, everyone.